Hello and welcome to the Farmhouse. I'm Candace Wierzbowski.
And I'm Stephanie Spiker.
And in a little bit, we will be talking to Ashley Asdal. Ashley Asdal is the owner of Riamede Farm. It's a pick-your-own apple orchard in Chester, New Jersey. The farm has been in operation since the 1930s, and it opened its gates for pick-your-own in 1974, making it one of the first pick-your-own orchards in the state. So Ashley recently took over the farm, but before then, she was in the Navy. She graduated from the U.S. Naval Academy and Harvard's Kennedy School of Government. So today, we're going to learn about how Ashley made the transition from Navy to Ag and why Riamede is such a special operation. But first, we've got a little treat for you.
Yes, we do. For those of you who have yet to catch on, we're doing a new segment called Little Treats, where we're going to share some news from our website, lancasterfarming.com, that feature women in ag. And this week, we're talking about a very young woman in ag. Her name is Grace Morensic, and she's only 8 years old. But at 8 years old, she just made history, which is pretty amazing. Grace recently showed two of her Meishan pigs at the Lebanon Area Fair in a class of the pig show specifically dedicated to the Meishans. And according to the American Meishan Breeders Association, this is the first time in the US that there has been a class of all registered Meishans shown at any fair. So Grace and another young woman showman named Lena Voidick showed Meishans, making history with these pigs. And if you're not familiar with Meishans, they don't quite look like what you normally think of a pig to look. They're pretty big. They have very wrinkly, squishy faces, very long ears. They're almost silly looking, but in a very cute way. Very cute.
The Shar-Pei of pigs.
Oh my gosh, that's the absolute best way to describe them. So yeah, but Grace really, she didn't intend to make history. She just wanted to join 4-H and she wanted to be in the livestock club. And her parents were like, well, we have Meishan, so if you want to be in livestock, I guess you're showing a pig. So it just kind of happened that she was able to be historic and just have a great time showing. And she won both the champion and reserve champion Meishan at the Lebanon Area Fair. So, and I got to be there to watch, which was very exciting. So there, you can read all about it and see these kind of strange looking little pigs, very big pigs, not little at all, at lancasterfarming.com.
Awesome. Well, from pigs to apples, I'm sure there's some sort of correlation.
Pork and apple go really well together in like recipes, so it kind of makes sense.
All right. On that note, we are going to dive into our interview with Ashley and hear all about Riamede.
Ashley, welcome to the Farmhouse. Thank you so much for joining us.
It is such a pleasure to be here today.
So, did you always want to work in agriculture?
No, I had no idea I wanted to work in agriculture until about 4 years ago. I was going to be in the Navy. I was going to fly fighter jets. That's what I would have told you in high school. In college, I would have told you for sure I was going to be in the Navy because I was at the Naval Academy. In young adulthood, I would have told you I'm going to command a ship. And then in 2019, an acquaintance of our family got very sick and was looking for the next step here at the farm. And I wasn't super happy with where I was going in the Navy anymore. I didn't see it as like the perfect future. And she happened to catch me at the exact right second. And she said, do you want to come up and run a farm?
Wow. And the door's opened.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd always had background, I would take backyard gardening classes and I had tomatoes always growing on my porch, but I was in the Navy. I didn't have a farm. I grew up, my dad was a builder. My mom stayed home. I didn't have any sort of ag background whatsoever, but I am thrilled to be here and I really like it. It's really fun.
That's awesome to hear. So tell us about Riamede Farm. What makes it stand apart from other orchards?
Riamede has been around for a very long time. The same basic plot in production for now almost 300 years. And so that feels really different than a lot of farms. We're here in Morris County in northern New Jersey. It's kind of a historic area. The house was one of the first settlers in the area. The Swayze brothers, actually, this is kind of crazy. One of the Swayzes built the house that I live in now on this farm. The other
What?
one, I grew up in the Swayze house down the street 5 miles. Swear to God.
Wow.
Wild.
Isn't that crazy? Like,
Crazy for Swayze.
so crazy. Anyway, so the trees are really cool, right? They're very unique. When you go and buy an apple tree and you like go to a nursery, someone's gonna say, well, maybe 40 years, tops 50. That's kind of what you would expect. So for these trees to have been planted in the late 1930s and still be literally bearing fruit for us nearly 100 years later, I think is really remarkable. And it gives the orchard this totally different kind of step back in time feel that I think our customers really appreciate, that it's, it feels almost like a park in some ways.
Yeah. I didn't know that about apple trees, that
Yeah.
they have kind of a fruiting lifespan, I guess.
They have kind of a limited lifespan, but these trees have been really well cared for. And that's one of the things I think about when I'm here at this farm is like, you're a caretaker, right? And you sometimes hear other farmers talk about being caretakers of the land or stewards. And you really feel it with these old trees. Like, this is generations of other people's labor and care. Every single year, someone has pruned these trees since 1938. And it hasn't been me and it hasn't been our farm manager. It's been generations and generations of hands keeping these trees in amazing condition, which I think is really cool to kind of think of yourself in that line as opposed to just like, I'm a business person. It feels different than that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's almost like I'm gonna quote Gilmore Girls, which is surprisingly the first time I've ever done that on this podcast, because I watch it all the time. But there's an episode where they're talking about this old inn, and they say, I think sometimes that I'm a part, or that it's a part of my history, but in reality, we're a part of its history. So I feel like with the trees, it's like you get to be a part of the farm's history a little bit.
Yeah, it very much feels that way, which doesn't mean that we're not also modernizing and planting new varieties and using much more modern management techniques. But, sometimes when I bring, like when extension agents come out, especially the older ones, they'll be like, oh my gosh, this is a museum of all of the extension practices over the last 50 years, right? Like the old trees are planted 40 feet apart, which is very inefficient in terms of modern practices where people are planting on like 2.5 by 10 feet. And we're at 40 by 40,
Wow,
right?
yeah.
It's like 58 trees to an acre as opposed to thousands of trees per
I did
acre.
kind of notice that when I was looking at the map of your farm, and we'll talk about that map in a little bit because I thought that was a very cool thing on your website. But I did notice, I was like, wow, like those trees are really spaced out.
Yeah,
So-
I mean, that was standard practice of how to run an apple orchard from like the 1800s on. I mean, that's just what they looked like. And we don't know that because everyone ripped out those old trees.
Right, that's not
and
what you see
went to higher
anymore.
density.
Yeah.
Because it's not efficient, right? And it's hard to pick, it's hard to prune. It's not the most productive use of that acreage, but I think that it has other intrinsic value that's worth keeping,
Well, I feel like you already perfectly answered the next question I had for you, which is on your website, you describe Riamede as an old-fashioned apple farm, and I can see why. I was going to ask you to explain why, but I feel like you've fully explained exactly what's old-fashioned about it already. So
Yeah, I think we have a real focus on the experience of picking apples and pumpkins and the agricultural experience as opposed to the kind of more agritainment experience, which doesn't mean that doesn't have a value. I just don't think it's our spot in the market. Like we don't really, we don't have bounce houses. We don't have like a petting zoo. It's really very focused on like hop on a wagon, go pick apples. There are 54 varieties of apples here on thousands and thousands of trees. I mean, we have apples when most other farms definitely do not have apples, both before and after, just because it's an apple orchard. So I think that's a lot of like why people keep coming back here is because it feels really timeless for them and their families.
yeah. So I saw on your website that you work with Rutgers Extension to employ an integrated pest management program. So for listeners who maybe aren't super familiar with IPM programs, what is the benefit of an IPM program? And then what are some examples of that program at work on your farm?
Sure. IPM is super important and we love it. And we love our Rutgers team that works with us. The land grant university is such a gift to the American farmer. Like, people don't know how amazing those land grants are and what resources they provide. I sure didn't. I didn't understand when I walked in. Anyway, so we work with Rutgers. We pay a nominal fee each year for their scouts to come, and basically what we're trying to do is to carefully manage pest pressure on our crop so that we can produce the best crop we can with the minimal number of harmful inputs to the environment, basically. So for us, what that means is we've got sticky traps out for aphids, and we've got pheromone traps, and we're really doing counts every single week of what is the number of bugs per whatever acre, foot, I don't know, depends on what the input is, but right, like what's the number of bugs? What is the threshold for treating, right? You can have bugs and not find that that is a problem. There might be pests there, but they're not actually affecting your crop. And then when are you going to treat, and when do you need to treat again? And one of the cool things that we actually just did this spring was we installed a weather station. So now we're tied into Cornell's weather network, which is called NEWA. And so we can go on their website, read the data from our weather station, and then they'll say, based on their pest models, basically, and also fungal growth, really important in apples. They'll say your risk of fire blight right now is very high. You got to get a treatment down right now. Or alternatively, which I think is really cool, your risk of fire blight is not as high as you think. You do not need to apply whatever treatment you think you need to treat. So that happened a couple of times this year already, which is great, both like for the environment and also for my bank account, right? Like
your sanity.
Spray. That's thousands of dollars on sprays every time you come out and do that.
Yeah. It must be such like a peace of mind thing too, where it's like, that it's not even like in the general area. No, it's specifically your farm that they're talking about.
Yeah. So we're measuring leaf wetness, we're measuring humidity, obviously temperature, weather, the wind, and all that combined feeds back into these really high-end university models, which then tell the farmer, me and my farm manager, there's so much science to this that now we can access, which I think is amazing. So the IPM is all of that, right? It's minimizing the sprays, it's using alternative methods when we can, it's crop rotation, it's safe seeds, it's all of that, all combined is integrated pest management. And I'm sure I'm butchering it, and some scientists would tell me that it's much more than that. But that's how I think about it, is it's really a great program.
Yeah.
And I get a lot of value from it.
And I feel like, we don't need a scientific definition, right? I think especially for our listeners who might grow fruit or whatever, it's probably more helpful to hear your perspective and how you're actually using it than an official definition. So we don't need official science here right now.
Yeah.
There's a time and a place.
Yeah.
The other thing I think about when I think about IPM is also that, like, I am retailing all of the fruit that I sell. There's no wholesale here whatsoever. Every apple that I grow gets picked by a customer and comes out in their bag. And that, I think, also gives me some leeway in terms of fruit coloration, in terms of fruit size, in terms of like minor blemishes, that if I was wholesaling into a huge international food system, I couldn't tolerate some of the imperfections that I think are absolutely tolerable and even sort of desirable in a retail setting. So I think that also helps me keep my my pesticide use down, just because like you can tolerate a little. It's okay in this particular setting that I'm operating in.
Yeah. So you kind of mentioned your military background, and I was wondering, how did your time in the Navy help prepare you to serve in agriculture? And do you think that the move from military to ag is one that would benefit others? We recently talked to our coworker, Mel, who had a similar trajectory where she started off in the military and now she farms, and she had some feelings on this as well.
Yeah, I think it's a completely apt transition. Like it works for me. I don't know that it would work for everyone, but it feels really, I think we get a lot of skills in the military. So I spent 4 years at the Naval Academy and then 11 on active duty service in the Navy. So 15 inside of like a military lifestyle, right? And you learn a lot of discipline. You learn to wake up early in the morning, to have a long day, to lift heavy things, to make decisions, to think about risk and quantifying risk in clear ways, both to yourself and to the people who work with you. You learn to lead. I mean, all of those are really important farmer skills, right? Like there are really smart scientists who can teach me how to do pest management, but it is very hard to learn how to lead a team, how to communicate effectively, how to make decisions and understand why you're making them and communicate those. So those skills, which I think are much harder in some ways to get, have really helped me here at the farm. And especially I have a really great partnership with my farm manager, Jamie, who's been here for 15 years. He's a Rutgers Ag grad and he's about my age. And so he's been here and he knows. So the way that we kind of break it down is like I run the business and he runs the farming. Ish. I mean, that's a gross,
An oversimplification.
Yeah.
But that's really helped. In the fall, there's 50 people on payroll here running all of the retail stuff. That's a lot of teenagers to tell what to do.
Yeah.
And I think I have the skills from the military to manage young kids and take care of them. And I think that's one of the best parts of transitioning from the military into this job is that I get to have really positive impact on my community, right? Like there are a lot of people around here that I get to work with. They're children, right? I mean, most of my staff in the fall is kids and I like them. They work hard sometimes, most of the time.
We were all teenagers on a job
Right,
at some point. We understand.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, what's the worst day, right? Like I used to spend time off the coast of Iran and be really stressed about like actual missiles coming towards my ship and defending a carrier from this. Like that is stress. Like,
It's perspective.
I'm unhappy with my emotional support animal not being allowed into the farm. Like, okay, that's, just the level of.
Yeah. Yeah, it does give you perspective.
For sure. I feel like we have said more than once, every once in a while something dramatic happens with systems or whatever here, and our editor has even said like, listen, it's a newspaper. This is not life or death. Like it is what it is. We'll figure it out. We'll move on. And it is nice to be able to have that perspective of like, yeah, this could be a lot more stressful. This could be a lot worse. So
yeah, which doesn't mean farming is not stressful and extremely risky in other ways.
Yeah.
And I think the more that I am here, the more I understand the risk that I am accepting. I definitely did not understand it in year one. Like, oh, this is great. Apples just grow on trees. Hang on.
So you mentioned you said 54 apple varieties. Mm-hmm. And then I know you also do pumpkins and squash and gourds. So how do you keep track and manage all of that? That's a lot of different stuff going on at the farm.
It is a lot of stuff going on at the farm. Well, my brain kind of works in spreadsheets, so I do a lot of that. But the other thing that I've been doing, which is cool, is I've been working on this map. So I have this subscription to a program called ArcGIS, and I know this is nerdy, and I did this in my master's program, which is why I learned how to use it. But basically, I have put a pin on every single tree on the farm, and like created a data point for it. So now when people are coming through the farm, I turn the trees on and off that are ripe and not ripe. So you can kind of see like, hey, the preponderance of trees that are ripe right now is in the back left field, or what kind of tree is this that I'm standing next to? I don't know how many people are actually using it, but I find a lot of joy in it.
I loved this. I
Yeah.
actually had this down to ask you about this map because I spent more time than I probably needed to on your website playing with the map and looking at the different trees. And, you know, we're a little too far away from your area to really be able to go out and pick from your farm. But I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like if I was on that farm, like I would have this in one hand being like, oh, we should go like, I don't know, looks like 10 yards that way. Like there's a tree that like is right that way. I think it's very cool. I don't think it's nerdy at all. I mean, maybe it's a little nerdy, but
It's a little nerdy.
No,
I think it's very cool.
We support nerdy endeavors on this podcast. That's for sure.
I also think it's like helpful. I use it when I'm reporting crops to NRCS and FSA. You know, like I really am using it for data for my farm insurance. All of that is, I mean, I don't know how else you would do it. It's so complicated. There's so many different things. And now we're adding new vegetables in for the summer. So I'm trying to like expand our season a little bit. So the crop mix is going to get bigger, not smaller, as we keep going here.
Good.
That's exciting.
So speaking of expanded offerings, could you tell us about some of the public events that you host at Riamede?
Oh, I love the public events. I'm really trying to get the farm to be a place where my local community chooses to gather. I think it's important, right? Like it's not just that we are a U-Pick farm where people from Brooklyn drive an hour out on Columbus Day weekend, you know, like, yes, that is a very important part of my business model, but we're here 12 months a year, not 2, right? So I've been working on community events. I started out with barn dances because I don't know, we have this old barn and it hadn't been used for anything. And I just thought it would be really cute to do a square dance. And they were really well received. People thought they were fun. So I've been doing square dances and line dances in the off season, right? Like not during the high season. I've been doing farm to table dinners with this local chef who does like amazing Italian food. So I've actually been custom planting for him a little bit. Like he says, I want fava beans. And then I grew fava beans for him. I don't know, that kind of thing. Like, I want this kind of eggplant, not that kind of eggplant. Okay, like we'll have that for you in August. And they've been really, really well received. People like, I think, supporting local. I think they like having something fun to do, something that's very kid friendly. You know, those dances and the live music and stuff expose people to ag in a way that feels accessible, I think. And of course I always have like my vegetables here, come also buy my vegetables.
And by the way,
would you like to pick a sunflower, please?
Yeah.
I love that.
I mean, I feel like if I was like being asked on a date to one of these dances and there were sunflowers to be bought and picked and my date did not get me a sunflower, I might be a little
red flag.
Yeah, I might be a little put out.
I haven't been for a while, but I used to go line dancing a lot, and I do think it's so much fun. And I feel like to line dance in an old barn feels more special, kind of, right? Like it's like this is how it's supposed to be. Got the wooden floors, the vibe.
Roots.
Yeah.
Yeah, though, you know, the line dancers can be very hardcore about the perfect floor.
100%.
And I'm like, but it's an old barn. Like we're line dancing, aren't we country in the barn? And they're like, you are scuffing my $500 boots here.
Oh,
sorry.
Well, then wear cheaper boots. Everyone has an old pair of boots in the closet.
Oh, boy.
It's fun though. I bring a food truck. There's a local brewery that comes out and sells beer. I don't know. I like them. I only do events that I personally want to attend. So that's
the best way to organize an event. I feel like if you're not excited about it, why would other people be, right?
No, I don't know. It's fun. And I get to meet so many other great local business people. I do this Christmas at the Farm event in November where we host like local craft vendors. And the first year it was to extend the season again, right? Like I wanted people into the apples. There were extra apples please come pick the apples. And I was trying to think of ways to get people to the farm. So we did this Christmas at the farm vendor market. And it's been super successful. Lots and lots of people come. But I really like it because I get to highlight all these other local businesses who are doing really interesting things, like cooking great stuff, making super fun sauces or cheeses or whatever. I mean, I like being part of this food community, like a little bit broader than ag, like one step out, that kind of wants to gather here at the farm.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've already mentioned your farm to table dinner event, which is in later in August, and I saw on your website it's already completely sold out a month ahead of time.
Yeah.
So what do you think makes that event so popular that it sells out so quickly?
Yeah, they sell out in like 4 days.
Oh,
Basically,
crazy.
it's like selling out off of my mailing list at this point, which is like crazy. And I think I think I have people who care about this farm and support it and like the feeling of, I have a lot of repeat customers now coming to them. Um, and they like the feel of it. I think they like that it's fresh and it's local and they know where the food is coming from. When they're repeat customers, I think they like the experience, right? Like the chef is kind of giving a cooking demo. I bought this big 6 burner stove and he cooks in front of them. So that's really fun, right? Like it feels like a cooking lesson. He's very Italian. He tells them about the proper Italian cheese that's, and and I stand up and we'll do like a little farm tour beforehand during cocktail hour, and they get to see what's growing and where it's growing and what we're working on next. So I think that they like the community feel of it. Like, yes, they like the food. The food is good. The food is really good. Um, but I think it's more the whole experience of connecting with a local farm in a way that feels really meaningful
Sure,
that
yeah.
gets them coming back.
I mean, it sounds like a
That's
good
my
time.
hypothesis.
Yeah.
Yeah, sounds
Anyways.
awesome.
Yeah.
I'll have to get on your mailing list so I can get tickets next year.
So, why do you think pick your own operations are important to agriculture?
They're really important because we have so little connection to farms, as a country. I mean, what's the stat? 2%
Yeah.
farmers, 1% farmers? It's
Small.
really
Yeah.
low. Um, and people just don't know what it takes to get food onto their table. They think it is just, magic from the grocery store. And the number of times people have told me like, oh, that's how a tomato or an eggplant, or like they don't know how it grows. They don't know what the plant looks like. They don't know why it is shaped the way it is or the color, or they don't know. And so these U picks, when we have the opportunity to interact with people who only once a year are touching a farm, and the fact that they are once a year touching a farm, like good for them. Thank you so much for coming out. Sometimes I think I get cynical of like, oh, the public, it's so hard.
Yeah.
But like, it's really important to take care of them and show them, you know, what it is that we're doing here, and then engage them, whether that's in the dances or the dinners or the like other ways to get people onto the farm. I just think that it's super important and people don't value it at all.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's tough, I feel like, for ag because you kind of sometimes I think people want to stay in their little bubble and not have the public around, but it's also like it's so important for people to get to see firsthand what actually happens on a farm.
Yeah, and I teach even if it's not like personally me every single day interacting with every one of these thousands of customers, like all of my employees, we do employee training day. We do taste an apple every morning and we talk about what's ripe and why it's colored that way. So that the employees can also be like ambassadors really for what is happening at the farm every day. My other favorite thing that I do in season, I do apple club on Wednesday afternoons. And I go out and pick one of every apple that's ripe. And then I sit in the barn and whoever comes from 4:30 to 5:30, we taste all of the apples. We just have an apple tasting.
That
It's
sounds
so
fun.
fun.
That sounds so fun. Oh my gosh.
You ladies should come. I know it's very
Road
Very
trip.
tempted.
But
Yeah.
it's such a good way to like, again, like teach people, look at how much, even just in apples, right? Like there is such variety inside of agriculture in terms of the size and the scope and the flavors and the ways in which we farm. And that is just completely invisible to the general public.
Yeah, I feel like
As it was to me 4 years ago, right? Like
Mhm.
I'm coming at this with really bright, wide eyes because I didn't know,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, I feel like I would love to be part of the apple club because I'm sitting here thinking like, all right, like I know a decent amount of apple varieties. I don't think I could name 54, let alone I definitely haven't tasted 54. So I would just be interested in like finding new varieties that I like that I can then keep an eye out for.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's surprising how much variation there is. And I'm not even really growing cider apples. Like there's this whole other world of the much more astringent apples that go into cider
Hmm.
that I'm really not growing here, like a little bit, but mostly not. I mean, the apple genome is very broad and there's a lot of different flavors out there, but I think it's fun, you know, and to introduce people, especially people who are like, I don't like apples. Like, okay.
Who are these people?
You don't like
Yeah, who
that
doesn't like
one.
apples? Crazy.
Do you have a favorite variety, a favorite flavor?
I mean, it changes every week, but currently, Gold Rush. Have you guys ever
I
had a
have
Gold
not.
Rush?
I'm gonna write it
I
down.
know both of us just reached for our pens.
Okay, they're really good. They're like a late season Golden Delicious, but they have a lot of more crunch and tartness than that. Like they're Golden Delicious mixed with, I'm sorry, I don't know what they're mixed with, but they ripen like November 7th around here.
Okay.
And
Alright.
they're so good. They're really crunchy and so delicious, and they're so much better than Honeycrisp. And also the trees grow great. So both as a farmer and as a consumer, I like them. They're just like really nice trees. They're super disease resistant, like primo production quantities off of them. Plus the apples are so tasty.
I'm
All
gonna have
right.
to keep my eye out for them in the fall.
Come November,
Yeah.
I need to find one. So you've talked a little bit already about, wanting to support your local food community. And I know in your farm store you include food offerings from other local farms and local people. So why is promoting local food so important to you?
That is a super good question. I don't really know. I have always liked it. When I was in Florida in the Navy, I would like buy Florida food and like really make an effort to go to farmers markets. And I don't know, I think I like people who care about food, who want to support these small economies that are hyper local. I just think it's really like about caring about other people, you know, like that they like, for example, River Valley Community Grains is this collective that's helping farmers grow ancient grains in New Jersey. And they bought a mill and they mill the grains. So I sell some of the milled grains, right? Like delicious, like really good whole wheat flour and stuff like that. Um, but also I sell from a lady who uses them in her granola. And right, so her granola has like the locally grown oats in it and a lady who does cookies with the River Valley flour. So like, I don't know, it just feels very virtuous and supportive of other people who are trying to keep ag going in a state where it's really, really hard to do ag, you know, it's really expensive. The labor is not cheap at all, whether it's, you know, it's just a lot. So if I can provide that, like just a little bit of help for people who are trying to keep it going, I think that's super important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. All right, so what does being a woman in ag mean to you?
What does being a woman? I should have known that was coming. I've listened to every one of your podcasts.
Yeah, you're prepared. We love it.
I think it's a great place to be. I think it's really a very supportive community with a lot of growth opportunity for women in ag. I was listening to one of your podcasts and we were talking about like the farmer wife distinction and does that still make sense today? And I think that women are really able to shed that if they want and be equals here in this conversation about how to feed our country and our communities and our families. And I just think there's a lot of room for women to lead here and to have their own voice and also a different perspective, right? Like, I think that the perspective that women bring to the agriculture field is kind of sorely needed. There's a big generational change happening here. The average American farmer, the average American New Jersey farmer is very old. It's like a national security emergency. So, women have to step up, and we're here. And I think that the community is open for it, and we have the skills to do it. So I am thrilled to be part of Women in Ag. Danielle Wainwright really inspires me, by the way. She's doing such a good job as the Farm Bureau Women's Leadership person for New Jersey.
For anyone who has yet to listen, we have an episode with Danielle. So maybe if you haven't listened to that one yet, also tune into that one.
Yeah, she was great. She also had a great answer to that last question, I remember. I won't spoil it for anyone who hasn't heard it.
Yeah, no spoilers.
But it was a good one. All right. Well, thank you so much, Ashley, for coming to the farmhouse and spending time with us today. We appreciate your company.
It is my pleasure. I mean, really, so great that you ladies are doing this. Thank you so much for highlighting women in farming.
That was such a fun conversation with Ashley. It really felt like we were just chit-chatting as friends, and also the fact that she is a loyal Farmhouse listener, and we did not know that going into this interview, so that's incredible.
I know, that was wonderful to hear. Very touching.
So I'm a huge apple fan, and I think you are as well.
Who doesn't love apples?
Right.
Even if you don't love apples, I mean, who dislikes apples? I guess I should say.
It would be shocking to me if one of you really just hates apples. Please email us, just because we want to know you exist. Like, that is wild to me.
I also want to know your reasonings.
So, but do you have a favorite apple variety?
I do, and I'm excited about this Gold Rush apple because my favorite apple variety is Honeycrisp, and I feel like that's kind of a very common answer. I think the word is out on Honeycrisps and how delicious they are, and I say that because they are the most expensive apple at the grocery store to get. So I feel like I've got to pivot, and I've got to find a new apple that is just as delicious, but maybe not as hard hitting on my wallet. I used to really, really like Granny Smith's, which I know is also kind of a basic answer, but I like what I like. What about you, Steph? Do you have a favorite?
I don't know. I said to you earlier, I was like, I don't think I have a favorite, but I'm like, okay. I do have one
jaw was open.
I tend to go towards, and then, the one I do have one that I tend to go towards, and that's the Macintosh.
Really?
Yeah.
That, I am very surprised because, and I want to be careful with this because I don't want to offend any Macintosh growers out there or fans. I have heard that the Macintosh flavor has gone downhill in the last few decades or so because Macintosh apples have become bred more for their appearance than the actual flavoring.
I will say, for the most part, I almost never buy apples from the grocery store. I buy them directly from farm markets, so I don't know if that makes a difference.
That I bet it does. I bet your Macintoshes taste better than the average one in the grocery store.
There also was a variety I discovered last year that I bought solely based on the name, and Candace will know why as soon as I say it. They were the Nittany variety. I am a Penn Stater through and through, so I bought the Nittany's just based on their name, and honestly, they were really good, so I might be making a switch.
What kind? Are they red or yellow or green?
They're like a lighter red. They're a red.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm very excited. The Gold Rush sounded amazing. And we're just going to hit all the points of like Steph's crazy personalities in this episode because Gold Rush is also the name of a Taylor Swift song. So I'm in.
I think we've hit the trifecta. You mentioned Gilmore Girls, Penn State, and Taylor Swift.
That's almost everything.
Wait. We missed the Phillies.
Yeah.
Next episode.
Somehow I'll get a Phillies reference.
If you're playing Steph Bingo out there.
Oh, geez.
All right. Well, I think that wraps it up for us. Thank you all for listening. If you like this episode, please consider subscribing if you haven't already done so. If you really liked this episode, please consider leaving us a review.
If you have any questions about this episode or our podcast or thoughts, or you want to tell us your favorite apple varieties, you can email us at farmhouse@lancasterfarming.com.
You can also find us on social media at Lancaster Farming on most platforms.
Thank you again for listening and visiting us here at the Farmhouse. I'm Stephanie.
I'm Candace.
And we will talk to you later.
Bye.
This episode of The Farmhouse is copyright 2024 by Lancaster Farming Newspaper, part of the Steinman Communications family.
It was written by Stephanie Spiker and Candace Wierzbowski. It was produced by Eric Herlock and Matt Lee. The music you have heard throughout the show is courtesy of Tin Bird Shadow.